I almost had a
Oh,
towel on for
it's
this
broadcasting.
break.
It's
Yeah, it would have
broadcasting.
been good. A
JD.
towel just to hide my hair. My strategy. Okay.
All right, cool.
Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. So welcome to the July 8th Complete Streets Commission meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with Complete Streets Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. So the first item on our agenda is roll call, just in time. I'd like to introduce Complete Streets Commission members and staff present. Commissioners present include Jackie Sebrian, if you can just wave, okay, great. Jackie Sebrian, Patrice Espinosa, Bill Kirsch, Lydia Lee, Adina Levin, Mike Meyer,
Present.
Isaac Wyatt, and me, I'm Katie Baruzzi. And staff present include Kevin Chen, and also Patrick Palmer. Is it Palmer?
Palmer, yes.
It was like a different name on the screen. And then Nitu, I guess, Sawan. Is that right? No? Okay, sorry. I'm like looking at more people here. Commissioner John Cromie was not able to join us tonight. Patrick, could you please provide instructions to the Complete Streets Commission and members of the public now on how the meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Chair Baruzzi and members of the Complete Streets Commission. Welcome everyone to the July 8th, 2020 meeting of the Complete Streets Commission, and thank you for attending. At this time, we ask that the members of the Complete Streets Commission please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and respond to the members of the Complete Streets Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raise hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the Complete Streets Commission. That concludes the instructions and I return the meeting to the chair.
Thanks, Patrick. All right, so the first item on the agenda is reports and announcements. Under reports and announcements, staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items. I'll start with Kevin. Kevin, do you have any reports or announcements?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, welcome everybody. Good to see you all since our last meeting, which I believe is back in February, if I remember correctly. So good to see you all. I just wanted to briefly make some announcements regarding some of the logistics of the meeting itself, and then followed by some of the recent actions done by the City Council. So with regard to the meeting logistics, as you all know, this is our first meeting and probably with many more to come that will be using the Zoom platform. So I just wanted to let the commissioners know that from a logistics standpoint, as we continue each item, if you wish to speak, it would be great if you raise your hand first and then allow the chair to acknowledge you and then and then call upon you before you speak. That way, we'll try to avoid people talking over each other. It's also just hopefully that will make the meeting run a little bit smoother. The other thing I also wanted to touch on is the chat function. So as you know, there is a chat function in the Zoom. However, as you all know, we are a Brown Act body. So I would, at this point, ask the commissioners refrain from checking the chat function. It will be something that staff member will be checking, and if necessary, will bring any items to your attention. But certainly, I would ask the commissioners to refrain from checking anything in the chat function. Okay, so those are some of the logistics. So I'm going to go ahead and go talk about a little bit about City Council action items. As you know, we have quite a few things going on for the last few months. The big item being the budget passing. So luckily, about a couple of weeks ago, the City Council did pass a budget. And I just wanted to briefly touch on what that means for the transportation team. Since, as you know, prior to COVID-19, the transportation team had a few vacancies. And as a result of the COVID-19 closure and the budget constraints, one of the things that the city council cut was 2 opening positions from the transportation team. So we currently have about 7 people within the transportation division. There's about 4 engineers, 2 technicians, and you guys all know Nick, our Swiss Army knife that wears many hats. We still have 1 more opening that we could potentially fulfill. However, given the current climate, it potentially could take a while. So I think the team is currently about 7 members and will continue to be that way for a little bit of time. It's a good group of guys. Of course, and again, anytime you guys have any transportation related questions, don't feel free to reach out to us. The other thing I also wanted to touch on from the city council's perspective is that the next discussion topic will actually be the CIP. So that's the capital improvement program. As you know, this is involving mostly infrastructure projects, and the discussion will actually take place sometime in end of the month, July 28th, tentatively. It's going to be a very interesting discussion as it revolves about capital improvement projects, and as you know, a lot of that involves sidewalk improvements as well as green infrastructure improvements. So certainly, if that's an area of interest, I would definitely stay tuned to that one. Finally, the city council recently also adopted the new TIA guideline. So as you know, the TIA guideline is mainly for development projects to assess their potential impact to the city and to the environment. In the past, the TIA guideline focuses on level of service, which in turn is a congestion management metric. With a passing of Senate Bill 743, that particular metric is now being converted into VMT, vehicle miles travel. So that's a state requirement. However, with discussion through the city council, there was a desire, in addition to converting to VMT, to continue to retain level of service as a local metric. So what that means is that moving forward, a development project that wishes to build in the city of Menlo Park would need to conduct both VMT analysis as well as level of service analysis. So that's a fairly substantial step that the city council had approved. And as you all know, recently Santa Cruz Avenue was closed. So many of you, I believe, have frequented that area. So hopefully you like some of the features that have taken place. I understand that there is a couple of rearrangements of the furniture and the barricades that will be necessary within the next couple of days. So hopefully we'll be able to conduct that and allow more free passes for both pedestrians and bicycles as well. So with that, I will conclude my reports and announcement.
Can I ask a quick question about the Santa Cruz Ave? Yeah. And this is actually for use in the downtown parking and access subcommittee. I was going back and looking at the staff report for the plan that was approved. And I know it's a pilot, but I didn't see anything about metrics in the staff report. And I was wondering if you could remember, you may just not remember, like sort of the metrics that staff are currently using to assess the pilot.
Right. So there's currently, I believe, some talk about developing a metric. However, the project itself was relatively a quick turnaround. So that wasn't something that we were able to develop at the time. But I believe there is some interest within the commission to see if that's something that can be done, recognizing that the pilot itself was sort of a temporary pilot, or is a temporary pilot, and could potentially could change once COVID-19 is more manageable. So I think that's something that staff will be working with the commission and most likely a subcommittee, if there's a subcommittee that's interested in taking this further.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other reports and announcements? Looks like Adina has something.
I have a question and something to share. So the question is about the City Council agenda. We do have a climate subcommittee, and my understanding is that the City Council is fairly shortly going to be reviewing a recommendation from the Environmental Quality Commission about the Climate Action Plan. Has that been set as to when that will be coming before City Council?
I believe that's going to the City Council next Tuesday. if I remember the calendar correctly. I have to double check that and confirm that and verify that with the commission. But I believe the climate action plan item is going to the city council next week.
Okay, so that was something that I had heard before, but the city council agenda can change. So that was why I was asking. And then the thing to share is that tomorrow morning at a meeting whose public component starts at 9:30 in the morning, the Caltrain board is going to start to discuss whether to put a 1/8 cent sales tax on the ballot, which sounds like a crazy thing, but polling that was done in June in weeks 12 and 13 of shelter in place showed really surprisingly strong results. Bay Area public transportation has been hit really hard by the pandemic because of shelter in place, loss of ridership, and loss of tax revenues. And Caltrain is among the most vulnerable because it never had stable funding to begin with. And so this is something that is very relevant to, so Caltrain before the pandemic kept 4 lanes of freeway traffic off the freeway, and the changes that are planned would take an additional couple of more lanes of cars off the freeway. So this is a relevant thing, and so if anybody is interested in following along, they can find it at caltrain.com or dial in as individuals as they may wish. So that was what I wanted to share.
Is it going to be on the ballot in November?
The decision about whether to put it on the ballot would be made in August in the board meeting on the first Thursday in August. But they are starting the serious discussion started when they got the poll results and realized that this was a feasible thing.
Okay, thank you.
Lydia Lee, you have to unmute yourself.
There we go. There has been some recent communication between Jen Wallison of Parents for Safe Routes and a city council on the email log about asking Public Works, the Safe Routes to School coordinator, to work on coming up with bike and pedestrian plans for the hundreds of kids that will not be able to take the bus to school in the fall, given social distancing on buses. Do you know anything whether that has been taken up by Public Works or the SRTS coordinator?
I recently learned about that. Unfortunately, I don't have any update for you at this moment in time, so I apologize. I will go ahead and touch base with our Safe Routes School coordinator, and then I'll be able to provide some more additional information to the commission.
Okay, and then just one more thing. I'd like to ask that if you're not speaking, if you can mute yourself to make sure the quality of audio is good for everybody else, that would be helpful.
I guess I should unmute myself. All right, any other quick reports and announcements? We good? Okay.
To the chair, I see Commissioner Meyer, you have a hand up. I don't know if that's because
do
you want
you
to speak right now.
Yeah, and so the question is that what you mean by hand up, or we're literally going to do this? Because I can't see everybody at one time on the screen, like there's pages of people. So when you say raise your hand to speak, and we're going to keep everybody muted so that Lydia's audio quality is better, does that mean you need to go on here and press the raise your hand button to get called on? Is that what we're doing here? Just want to get process straight.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, so given the amount of screens that's on the amount of window that's on the screen, why don't we go ahead and do that? Why don't we go ahead and use the raise hand function? Both Patrick and I will be monitoring the screen as well, so we'll make sure not to miss anybody. That way you don't have to continue to raise your hand for the duration of the meeting. It gets tiring.
I'm actually not seeing that on my screen.
I'm not either.
If you're on an iPad, it's on the top right more. That you click it and there's a raise hand, and I'll lower my hand now. But I don't know where it is on Mac. I don't use a Mac. And then the other question I had with raising my hand was that this meeting ID is the public meeting ID for everybody that I see on here, the 959 number.
That is
People
correct.
are just asking me, so I'm going to tell them what it is.
Yes.
There is, for Mac users, there is a participants icon at the bottom of the window. And if you click on participants, you see two tabs, one for panelists and one for attendees.
Hey.
And in the panelists, you can see the raise hand icon.
Got it. Thank you. I can also share that we have like 22 attendees. That's pretty cool. Welcome, everybody. It's like the biggest meeting we've had in a really long time, and we're not even in the council chambers. Okay, is that it for reports and announcements? We good? Oh, actually, Kevin, one more quick housekeeping item. I am looking at the view of these people, but I can't actually see raised hands. So for facilitating, that means you're going to kind of have to let me know that somebody's hand is raised. Got it?
We'll do that. Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on to public comment. Under public comment, the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. Commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. And I would say that I know we have a lot of people here. I'm imagining that a lot of people have Willow's turn restrictions comments to make maybe, and this would not be that time. We'll be doing that under that agenda item. But if anybody else has public comment, do you see any hands raised? Kevin?
Let's go ahead and maybe give the audience a minute or so. So far, I am not seeing any raised
Did
hands.
people in the audience hear how to find the hand raising? You click, if you're looking at the window, at least for my Mac, you click on the participants thing at the bottom of the screen, and then it's like a sidebar that opens. Okay.
And I'd also like to just reiterate quickly, for members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raise hand feature function. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment. So not seeing any so far. We have one. We have Tracy Morris. Tracy, I'm turning your microphone on if you'd like to speak.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Tracy Morris. I live on Central Avenue, 535 Central Avenue, and I actually sent in a note earlier, but I just wanted to reiterate it. I was one of a group of people who got feedback from the community originally about the traffic situation in the Willows, and went to the city council and
Sorry, Tracy.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the Willows turn restriction item?
Yes. Am I in the wrong spot?
Yes. So this is for any items that are not on the agenda.
Oh, I
So,
apologize. Okay.
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry.
No worries.
No worries. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, any other, I see one more hand raised. No, that was Tracy. Okay, now I can see how that the hands are raised. That's cool. Okay, so I will go ahead and move into the next part of our agenda. And thank you, everybody. Let's see. Okay, so regular business. Under regular business, the commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. So we're going to start with item E1, which is approving the Complete Streets Commission regular meeting minutes of February 12th, 2020, which is the last time we met. I actually wasn't there, so I will not be able to vote on the minutes. I will be recused from this vote. But does anybody on the commission have feedback for the minutes? Did anybody who was there read the minutes and notice anything? Anybody? Okay. Is there a motion? Does anybody have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. All who are in attendance at the meeting, which would not be me or Isaac or Patrice, who would like to vote, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. I think that was everybody. Did you get that vote, Kevin?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, great. The next item is the one that many people I think here are waiting for. Recommend to City Council to make permanent the Willows neighborhood turn restrictions. So we have with us tonight staff member Rich Angulo, and he's going to be making a presentation. And then what will happen after the presentation is we'll ask any clarifying questions from the commission, but we won't get into any discussion. Then we'll take public comment from our guests, and then we will go into our discussion. All right, Rich, take it away.
I'm muted now. Hello?
Hey, Rich. Hey.
We can hear you,
we can
Rich.
hear you okay. Do you want to go ahead and turn on your camera as well?
Okay.
Yep.
It won't let me. Let's try that. All right. Here we go. All right. Good evening, council members. Commission members, sorry, Complete Streets Commission. Tonight we're going to talk about the turn restrictions that happened out in Willows. This whole thing started in May 2017 when Caltrans began the reconfiguration of the US 101 interchange. November of 2017, Caltrans installed temporary traffic signals out at the interchange during the construction. And during that time frame, Bill, can you hear me?
Hey, Rich, if you can maybe speak a little louder or into the microphone.
Okay.
You're a little bit faded.
Okay. Let me see if this helps. Is that better? Okay. Okay. Yeah, in December of 2017, Caltrans put in some temporary traffic signals, which caused increasing traffic delays in the Willows neighborhood. Because of those traffic delays, staff in December 2017, staff presented a report to City Council, which gave an update on the Willow Road interchange connection, as well as the effects that the impacts were having on the neighborhood. At that time, the City Council directed staff to implement vehicle turn restrictions at 4 intersections during the afternoon peak hours on a trial basis. This was to discourage traffic from cutting through the neighborhood. The City Council also directed staff to return with a final recommendation after the construction was completed on the 101 overpass and the effectiveness the turn restrictions were having. Construction on the interchange was completed in August of 2019. So in September of 2019, staff hired Parisi Consulting, transportation consulting, to analyze the traffic, do traffic volumes out there, do turn restrictions out there, and do a survey to the residents regarding the turn restrictions and the impact it was having on them. We had several comments from the survey come in on that. Some of them were not particularly directed at the turn restrictions. This report tonight is strictly regarding the turn restrictions that were put in. We had over 300 comments with that survey, which is amazing. And so I just want to appreciate all the input that was put in by the neighborhood for this. I've known this for a long time, and to have that kind of consensus was amazing. At this point, I'd like to hand this over to Patrick Gollier with Parisi Transportation Consulting to discuss their findings through the analysis. Patrick.
Thank you very much. Rich, I didn't see the PowerPoint. Are you presenting it or are you displaying it? Okay, thank you. Can you go to slide 3? Rich, are you able to move the slides, please? Sorry, Rich, you're muted. Rich, are you able to give me control of this PowerPoint?
Sorry for the technical difficulty there, members of the public and commission. As you recognize, this is our first meeting using Zoom platform, so
Okay.
certainly appreciate your patience and your understanding on this as we try to figure this out.
Okay, so
there we go.
Greetings, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. My name is Patrick Golier, and I'm from Parisi Transportation Consulting. And I've been working over the past several months with staff from Menlo Park, including Rich and Kevin, on evaluating the effectiveness of the 4 vehicle turn restrictions that were installed in the Willows neighborhood in order to come up with a recommendation on whether to retain or remove these restrictions. Okay. The project timeline here will help to provide some context around the qualitative and quantitative data points that we used in order to complete the evaluation, which includes vehicle volume counts taken from throughout the Willows neighborhood and the results of a public opinion survey. In the spring of 2017, the city collected counts throughout the Willows neighborhood as part of their annual traffic count effort. Excuse me. And prior to the start of the Caltrans Willow Road interchange project. The turn restrictions were installed in late 2017, and another round of traffic count collection was conducted in the spring of 2019 prior to the completion of the interchange project. And these counts were used to evaluate the impacts of the turn restrictions throughout the neighborhood. In addition, this past winter, we worked closely with Menlo Park staff to engage the community on their opinions of the restrictions via an online survey that I'll discuss tonight as well. So as Rich described, the turn restrictions were installed in 4 different locations throughout the Willows neighborhood in direct response to the neighborhood impacts resulting from the Caltrans construction at the Willow Road interchange with Highway 101. In order to manage the number of drivers cutting through the Willows neighborhood to avoid congestion on Willow Road, right turns were restricted from Chester, Durham, and O'Keefe Streets to eastbound Willow Road, and a left turn restriction was installed onto Baywood Avenue from Woodland Avenue. Oh, shoot. Oh, going the wrong direction, I'm sorry. Okay, so these turn restrictions were installed during the afternoon peak hour period from 3 to 7 p.m. on weekdays. Okay, and one of the entry points into the neighborhood off of Willow Road and Middlefield Road. Oh man, sorry. All right, so this map compares daily traffic volumes between the 2017 and the 2019 data points, representing, Rich, maybe you can control it. Slide 7, 1 up.
Okay. Sorry, Patrick. I'm thinking maybe because it's on my computer that's how it's going on, because my computer isn't working right either. So, okay. Is this one you want?
1 up.
Okay. Right there.
There, right there.
Okay.
This map compares daily traffic volumes between the 2017 and the 2019 data points, representing the traffic volumes on these streets over a 24-hour period. So I'll be blowing up the maps on subsequent slides, but what I want to emphasize here is the color coding of the various roadway segments, which correspond to changes in traffic volumes between 2017 and 2019. So blue on the map, the blue roadway segments represents a decrease in traffic between the two time periods. Gray represents no discernible change, and orange represents an increase in volume. So this data shows, or the map shows, a mixed bag. So while some segments have increased traffic volumes, other segments show no change and others show a decrease. But importantly, the northbound segments of Chester and Durham streets show decreases in traffic. Now, I do want to emphasize that traffic volumes from day to day do vary based on many different factors, such as seasonal variability, network impacts, such as impacts on area freeways that might impact the numbers of vehicles on local streets. So it's important to consider the big picture trends that come from these data points and not, the individual numbers. Next slide. So here we see these segments a bit more closely. So the call out boxes show the northbound and the southbound volumes for both 2017 and 2019 for each of these three streets with the turn restrictions. Importantly, you can see that for Chester and Durham streets, the decrease in daily traffic volumes is due to the drop in northbound traffic, which is exactly what we want to see with these restrictions. More specifically, northbound volumes on Chester Street towards Willow Road decreased by 28%, from approximately 1,300 per day in 2017 to 900 per day in 2019. And northbound volumes on Durham Street decreased by about 14%, from approximately 900 per day in 2017 to 800 per day in 2019. Now, O'Keefe Street's a bit of a different story in that there was a 10% increase in northbound daily traffic volumes from approximately 1,000 to 1,100 per day. Next slide. And Gilbert Avenue, which runs parallel to Chester, Durham, and O'Keefe Street, but does not restrict right turns to Willow Avenue, experienced a 12% increase in daily vehicle volumes between 2017 and 2019, from approximately 3,700 to 4,100 vehicles per day. But while one might expect that this street might receive some of the traffic from Chester and Durham streets where volumes decreased, our data shows that that didn't happen. Northbound daily volumes remained about the same between the 2 years, with a 2017 northbound traffic volume of about 2,000 and 2,100 in 2019. Next slide. Rich, next slide. And Woodland Avenue is another street that provides access to the Willow neighborhood from the surrounding collector and arterial road networks. A left turn restriction was implemented on Baywood Avenue from Woodland Avenue as part of the Highway 101 construction mitigation project in order to help restrict the number of vehicles entering the neighborhood in the afternoon peak period. Importantly, the number of vehicles per day on Middlefield Road from Willow Road remained approximately the same between the two time periods at about 11,000 per day. Drivers turning off of Willow Road onto Middlefield Road and then turning left onto Bayview Avenue to avoid Willow Road congestion is one of the key groups of drivers that the turn restrictions was meant to address. And the data is showing that the number of vehicles on this segment of roadway did not increase during the construction period. However, we do see increases of daily traffic on Woodland Road in both directions, both into and out of the Willows neighborhood. And this might be the result of more drivers accessing Highway 101 via the University interchange. Next slide. In addition to the daily traffic volumes on the various street segments, intersection turn movement counts were also conducted at 3 different intersections in the Willows neighborhood during the afternoon peak hour. So these counts record the number of vehicles making specific turns at intersections. And for the purposes of this analysis, this data is helpful in identifying the change in vehicles turning from the local streets onto Willow Road in the afternoon peak hour before and after the implementation of the turn restrictions. And these 3 intersections that we have data for include Willow Road at Durham, Willow at Gilbert, and Willow at Middlefield. Now, this figure shows all the turn movements at these 3 intersections, but the data points that we are most interested in for the purpose of this study are on the following slide. So here you can better see the changes in the afternoon peak hour traffic volumes at the 3 intersections. The number of vehicles turning right from Durham Street to eastbound Willow Road dropped from 218 to 17, which is a drop of over 90%. This would indicate that there is overwhelming compliance with the turn restrictions on this street. The number of vehicles turning right from Gilbert Street to eastbound Willow Road in the afternoon peak hour, and this is a street without turn restrictions, increased by only 23 vehicles. And given that we know that 201 fewer vehicles made the northbound right turn on Durham Street, which is only one of 3 streets with the right turn restriction, the data suggests that Gilbert Street has not become the de facto cut-through route through the neighborhood. Finally, looking at the numbers of vehicles turning off of Willow Road towards the Willows neighborhood via Middlefield Road, we don't have intersection counts at Baywood Avenue, but the data at this intersection can be considered a good proxy to determine whether larger numbers of vehicles are leaving Willow Road towards the Willow neighborhood during this period of congestion. And what we see is another great trend. The number of vehicles in the afternoon peak hour turning off of eastbound Willow Road onto southbound Middlefield Road decreased by approximately 40%. So all of this suggests that the turn restrictions were successful in addressing the numbers of vehicles cutting through this community. Next slide. So just to summarize the changes in traffic volumes between 2017 and 2019, we saw compliance with the restrictions and minimal impacts on other neighborhood streets. What we saw from the data was variability in the change in both daily and afternoon peak hour traffic volumes throughout the neighborhood between 2017 and 2019. However, once we drill down, the data that we do have does support the question of whether or not the turn restrictions have been effective at reducing the number of vehicles using the neighborhood streets in the afternoon peak hour to avoid congestion on the main roads, such as Willow Road. Next slide. So moving on to the qualitative data points, an online survey was conducted between January 17th and February 3rd of this year to gauge public opinion on the turn restrictions. Postcards advertising the survey were mailed to residents in the neighborhood, and notifications were posted to official city social media platforms, including Nextdoor, Twitter, and Facebook. We received a total of 417 responses to the survey, which is incredible. Nearly all the respondents stated that they lived in the neighborhood and in the 94025 zip code. Next slide. So the next set of slides will provide a summary of some of the questions that were asked in the survey and the responses that were received. The first question on the left asked respondents why they travel in the Willows neighborhood, including whether or not they live or work in the neighborhood, whether their children attend the local schools, or visit the neighborhood for its parks, or to visit friends and family. Respondents could choose more than one answer. And on this question, over 96% of the responses indicated that the respondents live in the neighborhood. Question 2 on the right asked respondents about the perceived level of concern about cut-through traffic in the Willows neighborhood prior to the installation of the turn restrictions. And the pie chart shows that over 3/4 of the responses indicated that cut-through traffic had been a serious problem, with over 88% of respondents indicating that it was either a moderate or a serious problem. Next slide. The next question inquired about respondents' travel patterns as a result of the turn restrictions, asking, did you change your typical traveling patterns as the result of the turn restrictions? And the pie chart on the left shows that about 64% of respondents did change their afternoon travel patterns, while about 34% indicated that the turn restrictions had no impact on their driving patterns. When asked about the perceptions of the benefits versus the drawbacks of the turn restrictions on vehicle circulation, about 2/3 of the respondents answered that the turn restrictions resulted in significantly more benefits. Only about 16% of responses indicated that the turn restrictions resulted in slightly or significantly fewer benefits, and a relatively small percentage that believe that the drawbacks outweigh the benefits for traffic circulation. Next slide. The next question asked more broadly about the perceived impacts of the turn restrictions on the neighborhood, asking, I think that the turn restrictions have resulted in a positive or a negative impact on the neighborhood. Responses indicated an overwhelming percentage of respondents reporting that the turn restrictions have a positive impact on the neighborhood, with over 81% of responses indicating a very positive or somewhat positive impact. Only about 14% believe that the turn restrictions have resulted in a somewhat or a very negative impact. And the next question asked directly whether respondents believe that the turn restrictions should remain in place permanently. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with 73% indicating that they should remain. About 17% believe that they should be removed, and 10% believe that some changes should be made. Next question, or next slide. And the survey also included an open-ended question allowing respondents to provide any additional thoughts that they might have on the turn restrictions. A total of 325 responses were recorded, and which are provided verbatim in the staff report for your review. But for a high-level summary of these comments, again, respondents indicated their support in principle for the restrictions, despite some reporting an increase in travel times to and from Highway 101 in the afternoon peak hours. Some reported that a lack of enforcement of the restrictions by the Menlo Park PD reduces their effectiveness, though the data does show overwhelming compliance. Some reported some operational concerns within the community, including some visibility concerns, and which are unrelated to the turn restrictions, but have been provided to city staff for their review. And finally, some have requested exemptions to the restrictions for cyclists and for residents that live in the Willows neighborhood. Next slide, Rich. So in conclusion, the changes in traffic volumes between 2017 and 2019 show overwhelming compliance with the restrictions and minimal impacts on other neighborhood streets. Additionally, a strong majority of survey respondents feel that the turn restrictions have had a positive impact on the neighborhood, that volumes of cut-through traffic have been a serious problem prior to the installation of the turn restrictions, and that the turn restrictions should remain in place permanently. And our analysis concludes with a recommendation to retain the 4 turn restrictions. Next slide, Rich. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Patrick. Rich, are you done too, or do you have more to say about this? You're muted. So I can't hear what you're saying. Rich, can you unmute yourself? And also stop screen sharing. Or maybe, should we leave it up to the screen so that we can talk about it, so that people can ask for, maybe we should. Let's leave the screen up for now. Okay. Rich, can I go ahead and ask questions or see if anybody has questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm having bandwidth problems with the screen sharing, I guess. So.
Oh, is the screen sharing causing problems? Okay.
But it seems to be okay now. Just my mouse is all over the place and not cooperating with stuff. So.
Okay.
But we're good.
All right. So the next item now would be for anybody on the commission to ask any quick clarifying questions. Was there anything you didn't understand? This would not be like the discussion of this topic, because we definitely have people here to make public comments. We want to hear from the residents. But if you have any quick questions, there was something you want clarity on, you can, I don't know, raise a hand, I guess. Jackie, did you have a hand up? Adina Levin.
I don't know if it's a clarifying question or a save it till later question.
Okay, it's Jackie first. All right.
Okay, sorry.
That's good. That's okay. I'm having to scroll back and forth to see all the faces, so it's a little tricky. But Jackie, go ahead.
So 2 questions I had are, one of them is, do we have any kind of traffic study that predates the construction of the overpass? Or is all of our traffic data from that maelstrom of bad traffic? And then the other question I had, well, I guess, is there an answer for that? Or
Yes, we do biannual counts in the Willows neighborhood. So actually, okay. The 2017 counts were done on our annual or biannual.
Right, right, but they were after the construction started, right?
They happen to be before the construction.
I'm curious, What? They're from before the construction started?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other question I had is, have we talked to the market that's there at whatever that corner that's right here on your picture? Like, are cars just cutting through the parking lot to get around the right turn restriction? Do we know if that has become an issue or no?
I do not know. We have not talked to them.
Okay.
Did Adina has her hand up.
Yes, I have two questions. One question, I think, which may relate to what Commissioner Seaborn was asking is, do we have any evidence of a change in the amount of car traffic and delay on Willow? Because if we are, prohibiting, providing the turn restrictions, how much is that impacting the trip for people who stay on Willow? That's question number one. And then question number two, could you go back and navigate? It seemed like Woodland was the place that had seen a lot of additional vehicles. And how much in terms of the survey responses, did you see people who were reporting who lived on Woodland or used Woodland, including people who may live even further down Woodland, who may have seen an increase in car traffic, but may not have had any idea that it was due to this change on Willow, but may have been impacted anyway. So what have you heard from Woodland, and what outreach have we done to people who may have been impacted on Woodland? And those are my two questions.
Rich, are you able to answer that, or Patrick?
Patrick, from our surveys, can you tell who was actually lived on Woodland and who didn't? From the responses that I see, I can't tell whether they lived or not. I didn't notice anything from the Woodland. Very few comments from Woodland from what I've read.
Sorry, I was muted. We did not ask on the survey for people to provide addresses. So from the survey respondents, we were not able to discern what streets they lived on unless they stated in the open-ended question. And regarding the question about traffic on Willow, Rich, if you could scroll up to probably slide number 4, which is the one that I described the color coding on it. Maybe one up from this one. Okay, so again, orange is increase in volume, blue is a decrease in volume, and gray is no change in volume. And so you can see it's a mixed bag. Each of the roadway segments is slightly different in terms of the percentage change of traffic over a 24-hour period from block to block on Willow.
I'm looking for hands. I have a question if nobody else does. And I think you said this in the presentation, but when you were collecting the qualitative feedback from the residents, what was the geographic range from which you were seeking feedback? Was it limited to these streets where you had the turn restrictions, or was it, no, it was broader, right? Because you had like 450 people. That would have been like all of the Willows or something. Can you tell me what the range was? And I'm also curious about whether or not you've checked in with the VA. I don't know like what their perspective is on this.
Rich, I believe you sent out the postcards, so it would be better able to answer that question.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. We did some of East Palo Alto as well as this neighborhood. It was approximately 2,000, I think. I'm not really sure. This project started before I came on with Angela Obeso, so I'm not sure where she started with that. but if I remember correctly, it was over 2,000, and it was beyond just the Willows neighborhood.
Okay.
I can jump in real quick just because I happen to help out with the outreach a little bit. So in terms of postcards, every step of the way, we have been sending notifications to the entire Willows neighborhood, plus the portion, so if you reference the map, the portion of East Palo Alto that is sandwiched between 101 and Laurel Upper School. So that area, we also included that area as well, just because we recognize that some of those residents might use Durham and Oki, et cetera, to access Willow. So we also included that entire block of neighborhood.
Anybody else with clarifying questions? Otherwise, I will take it to public comment. Okay, Lydia.
I noticed in the responses, there was a lot of questions about whether the signs in place had then triggered the wayfinding apps like Waze and Google Maps to then reroute people. Do you know if that indeed was the case, that the physical signs then were the catalyst for the electronic systems then directing people differently?
It's my recollection from Angela that they did, Waze did get notified to our city that the turn restrictions were in.
Got it, thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and open up public comments. Sorry, I'm toggling between like the report and the chair notes and the screen, so sorry about that. So at this point, if there are any members of the public who would wish to speak on this item, again, we have a 3-minute time limit, and there are a lot of people here tonight. If what you really want to just say is, I agree with whatever the person before me said, you can like say less than 3 minutes if you want to, but obviously you're also welcome to talk for 3 minutes. Just, you can say +1 if there's somebody who just made a really excellent point. So right now I see 4 people who are ready for public comment. And I will just go down the list, I guess, but, oh, no, somebody who's actually in control should probably be.
I can help you out with that, Katie.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, so it looks like we have 5 right now. And I'd just like to remind the public, if you're just joining us and you'd like to provide a public comment, please just use the raise hand feature in the attendees tab, and then we'll get to you. So I guess we can start first. Julie Forbes, I'm turning your microphone on. So if you unmute, it looks like your account, you should be able to talk. And I will bring up the 3-minute timer as well.
Can you hear me? Just checking.
Yes, we can.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm a Willows resident and I have been for over 20 years. So I've been through, I don't know, this might be my 4th iteration of traffic mitigation. I happen to be perhaps in a minority of residents in that I'm a counter commuter. I go to work in the evening. So I'm actually trying to get out of the neighborhood at 6 o'clock or 5:30 to go to work. Whereas I'm guessing that a majority of neighbors are coming home at that time and not necessarily trying to get out of the neighborhood. And my quality of life has diminished exponentially because trying to get out of the neighborhood with the new traffic restrictions, I can only say anecdotally, I tried to time it on a periodic basis. It adds about 15 minutes of me trying to just get out of my neighborhood to 101 from before. And I've tried going out both ways. I've tried going out Willow, I tried going out University. And anecdotally, I think the Willows traffic is going on to Woodland because the University Avenue exit is much, much worse than it ever has been. And I have to backtrack back to Gilbert and get in the Willows traffic, which takes about, I can't even express how long it takes to get through the traffic to get out of the neighborhood. But it's very problematic for me, and I've tried changing my work hours. Sometimes I have to leave the neighborhood at 4 o'clock to get out and find ways to use time just to get to my job on time. And other people that I've in the neighborhood who don't usually have to get out of the neighborhood at that time and are usually coming home, when they have had to get out of the neighborhood, sometimes they've given up. And actually, like when they had a college seeking child who was wanting to go to a lecture from a college who was doing interviews, they said they turned around and came back because after 15 or 20 minutes of trying to get out of the neighborhood, they couldn't. So I know I'm in the minority, and I realize that other people who live on the neighborhood streets are seeing a much improved experience. But for those of us who need to get out of the neighborhood, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that the traffic mitigation is clearing up cut through traffic enough to improve what's worth for my quality of life. I feel like I'm taking the cost. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Julie. Patrick, you want to bring on our next caller?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Julie. Looks like next we have Amar. I'm turning on your microphone now, and you should be able to talk as soon as you unmute.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
awesome.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Amar Murgan. I live on Baywood Avenue in the Willows. I have lived here for more than 10 years, and I can tell you that over the past decade, the level of traffic on our street has increased significantly as there's been greater development in Palo Alto. The Stanford Hospital construction resulted in a parade of vehicles down our street between 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 4 and 5 o'clock in the evening. This obviously was exacerbated by the construction that was going on at 101 and Willow. I am very supportive of continuing these measures, and I guess I would just ask Patrick, I would thank him and the rest of the staff for the work that they've done, but I noticed that there was a suggestion that there isn't data for Woodland and Baywood, but when we did do the NTMP program in the Willows, there was data collected at Baywood and Woodland, and it showed that in 2017 there was approximately 1,350 cars that traversed our street in a 24-hour period prior to the implementation of the turn restrictions, and afterwards that got cut in half. So it really demonstrates the success of the measures, and not only reducing traffic volume significantly, but if you look at the speed data, and I did send you guys an email which included a link to the relevant data, as well as the survey that was sent that contained that data. It's very clear that that particular turn restriction was very successful. I would also consider, and I want to be sympathetic to the concerns that were expressed earlier about maybe difficulties that certain of our residents may have about getting out of the neighborhood. We have 3 young kids, all of whom do activities in the afternoons, and so my wife basically is a taxi driver from about 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night every day of the week, and so she's constantly shuttling in and out of our neighborhood. She has not found it to be more difficult to get out. In fact, she said that it's really just the traffic at Middlefield and Willow that tends to be the issue, and that she did not notice any difference between what the situation was before the traffic turn restrictions were implemented and what the situation was after. So I think it's probably you know, it's a person-to-person experience, but that's been ours. So I thank you for considering making these permanent, and would strongly encourage you and the City Council to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Amr. Patrick, who's next?
Thank you. Yes, I believe next we have Trisha Barr. Trisha, you are on. If you can unmute your mic, and you are able to start.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Trisha Barr, and I've been a Willows resident for the last 20 years. I strongly support making the Willows turn restrictions permanent. It's made a huge difference in the traffic volumes and the speed of the traffic that's cutting through the Willows. It's also made a huge difference from a safety perspective, because we have kids riding their bikes through the Willows, you know, back and forth from Willow Oaks, from Laurel Upper, from MA, to get to and from school and home during those hours. So compared to, you know, with the benefit and the safety, it's only been a minor inconvenience for our family to reroute when needed. So please make the turn restrictions permanent. Thanks.
Thank you, Trisha. Patrick, who else do we have?
Next we have Amy Rolder. You are on.
Amy, I think you might be muted.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Yeah, my name's Amy Rollader, and I live on Durham Street. And I just want to also strongly advise to make these permanent. I've lived here about 24 years now. And yes, those past couple of years before they did the turn restrictions were just awful. I could barely get in my driveway. I almost crashed a couple of times just trying to pull into my driveway, and got to a point where I just parked elsewhere and walked to my house because it was just so packed. Cars just down the street, bumper to bumper for several hours. So it's just been a godsend to have these in place. I feel like I can breathe again. I can walk down the street. I can get in and out of my driveway. And so again, I really highly encourage to make these permanent. I also want to comment, somebody asked on the commission about the people were illegally going through Mi Rancho parking lot and turning right. And I have not seen that. I was actually pleasantly amazed, but have not seen that. So I think Google Maps and Waze changing how they show people to go took that away, and people have not done that. So that's been really nice. Do you want to say anything?
And this is Amy's husband, Keith, and basically I just want to reiterate the same thing, is that I haven't seen anyone cut through the parking lot at Mi Rancho to go from Durham to Willow. So that hasn't been an issue. But lately I have seen more people taking a right from Durham onto Willow eastbound. But for the most part, it's been pretty good. And but yeah, it's been great since you guys put up the signs. It's been wonderful. And I feel like we have our neighborhood back better than before. And before it's just, it didn't feel like when we got home, it wasn't our sanctuary. Just cars out in front and you can hear them, and it was awful. It was just awful. So it's really improved the quality of life. And so we appreciate all the effort everybody's done to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. It looks
Actually,
like...
can I make a quick comment? Sorry. It looks like we have somebody who's joined the chat to ask about instructions on how to comment. So Patrick, maybe you could handle that. And I also just want to say that I'm not really sure. So there's some people who are actually providing public comment in the chat format. And I'm not sure we're meant to be looking at that because of the fact that this is a Brown Act meeting. And so I would ask anybody who's making chat comments, I think I see somebody named Chitra in there, to actually just go ahead and raise your hand and make the comments publicly. And that way they're available for everybody to review afterwards when they're watching the recording. I think that's the right thing to do, right, Kevin?
Yes. Thank you very much for that clarification, Chair. Yes, at this point, I would highly recommend that anyone that is providing feedback in the chat room to raise your hand and actually speak about those, because otherwise they would not be public record. If you have an opportunity to, and if you have a working microphone, I highly recommend that you raise your hand and then speak about those issues rather than putting it in the chat room.
So also, can Patrick maybe just give Will and remind people how to participate if they want to raise their hand?
Of course, yes. So for the members of the public who are in attendance and haven't heard our announcement before, if you would like to provide a public comment, all you have to do is use the raised hand feature in the Zoom webinar chat window. It should be under all panelists or attendees in your case. If you could just raise that blue hand up, and then I'll be able to go to you and access your microphone, and you can ask your question.
Thanks, Patrick. So we still have, okay, great. We have more hands up.
Yes. Yeah, it looks like next we have Carol. Hi, Carol. I'm allowing you to talk right now. So just unmute your microphone and you should be able to speak.
Thank you. My name is Carol Holsinger. I've lived in the Willow since 1986. I have just one quick comment and two questions. I don't know when it's appropriate to have them answered, but if it's possible, I would be interested. The first is that it has definitely increased my amount of time if I need to go out in the evening. I have looked up on Google Maps, for example, to determine how long it will take me to get somewhere. And if I forget to add 15 minutes to get out of my neighborhood, I will be 15 minutes late. So just a note about that. My two questions are, has there been any consideration of the impact of the coronavirus on our traffic situation? Because I know many people in our neighborhood are able to work from home, and I just am curious about the impacts of that. And I also, I thought that I heard that the police department might be eliminating their traffic enforcement responsibilities. And so I don't know that putting in traffic restrictions is how will they be enforced? So thank you very much.
Yeah, and if I may interject a quick comment, this is Kevin, her husband. Yes, we changed our traffic patterns. Now we drive out to the university most of the time, which is impacting our East Palo Alto neighbors, not our Menlo Park neighbors, and you didn't count traffic that direction.
And it still takes 15 minutes to get out of the neighborhood.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. I wanted to say I should have been doing this earlier, and I hope that if there were other questions that somebody else also caught them, but I'm typing down notes of questions that we can ask our staff at the end of the public comment period. So that'll be something else that I'll do after we've finished both public comments. Thanks.
All right, looks like next we have Brian, if there's no more discussion. Hi, Brian, I'm allowing you to talk. So if you just unmute your microphone, you should be able to speak.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, thank you.
Great, my name is Brian Gilmer. I've been a resident of the Willows for a long time. My family's been here over 70 years. And I've seen traffic go from bad to untenable. Even before the work was done on the overcrossing, traffic was starting to back up. I live on O'Keefe Street, and we were seeing backups going back a block and a half, even before the construction had started. When the construction started, those backups went 4 blocks all the way to Minalto, and it would take me 30 to 40 minutes to get a block into my driveway. Like most residents, we would actually cross into the oncoming lane to drive the block or so just to make the turn into our driveway, which was dangerous, and I'm glad we don't have to do that anymore. I had not had any experiences. I have had times when I've left to head eastbound on Willow. It does not seem to take me longer now than it did in the past. I cut up to Gilbert and then turn right at Gilbert and come down Willow, so I have to backtrack a little bit. That's added maybe a few minutes of time, but it has not significantly increased the time I spend getting out of the neighborhood. I have found that the turn restrictions have been a huge benefit to myself and all of my neighbors in the 500 block of O'Keefe, as well as many people I've talked to on Durham and Chester. It has also anecdotally cut back on the speeding that was going on roads like Central and Laurel due to cut through traffic trying to get through this neighborhood as fast as possible. They would exceed the speed limit and either barely slow or blow through stop signs on a regular basis. We're not seeing that nearly as much as we have in the past. And with the number of kids and families walking in the neighborhood these days, that's actually a very good thing. So I strongly encourage you to make the turn restrictions permanent. It has been a huge benefit to all of us. Thank you.
Next, Patrick?
Yes, looks like next we have Tracy. Hi, Tracy, you're on.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I've lived in the Willows for 17 years. I live on Central Avenue, and I want to echo what others have said about strongly encouraging you all to make the no-turn signs permanent. Traffic has gotten steadily worse on our street over the last several years, and before the signs were put in place, we would have people, as someone said, speeding down our road because there's a long straightaway, and they would speed down there to try to get a leg up, cut over on so they could get back on Willow to go to the Dumbarton Bridge. And I've seen cars passing others on our street going way above the speed limit. We have a ton of kids in our neighborhood, and it was extremely dangerous. And it's since the signs have been put in place, it's just, we've gotten our neighborhood back. It's a neighborhood the way it's supposed to be. It's not a speedway, and I really encourage you to make those permanent. And sometimes I have meetings in the evening and have to go out at night. And we'll leave a few minutes earlier to go over to Gilbert, and it's not ideal, but I think it's a small price to pay for the increased safety and calm in our neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Who else do we have? Patrick.
Looks like next we have Ilan. I'm not sure if I mispronounced that. I'm sorry, but you are on.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, thank you. I live on Laurel Avenue near Chester, and I've lived in the Willows for 12 years, and I was a daily cut-througher in this neighborhood before that, when I used to work in the Four Seasons complex. The situation I've observed is the same as many have reported, which is that over time, in the last 12 years, traffic has been increasing more and more. And it was really problematic even way before the construction began on the overpass. And we couldn't leave our neighborhood whether or not there were turn restrictions, because the cars would be backed up 2 blocks from Willow Road down Chester. My wife would sometimes have to abandon the car with our 3 young kids and walk to get to our house because it just wasn't possible to get here. And so the situation before the turn restriction was, huge pollution, a safety issue, the speeding problem that was mentioned, and also the road rage, which was not yet mentioned, and I think it needs to be understood. People would get very, very upset with each other, honk, drive aggressively. And so the observation I would add to the study is that traffic volumes in general have increased, and the east-west traffic from the working places have also increased. And so seeing a somewhat flat increase between 2017 and 2019 actually means that things are working pretty well. So I'm overwhelmingly in support of making these restrictions permanent. And I also want to recognize that it is hard to get out of the neighborhood, although I would say even without the turn restrictions, most nights we couldn't leave the neighborhood anyway. And so we wouldn't even be able to try to do it. However, my question and my request would be if it would be possible for the commission or the staff to look into creative options to help to alleviate some of the negative impacts of not being able to leave the neighborhood. I know that the right hand turn restriction has to be, enforced. However, I do believe that there are some creative things that might provide solutions to those who have to leave the neighborhood, who live in the neighborhood. For example, the police do have discretion in enforcing traffic laws. They can issue warnings or, choose to be more lenient. And so maybe that's one of the things that could be considered, where the police might be instructed to exercise that discretion if they do encounter a person who resides in a neighborhood and didn't actually cut through. So that would be my request. And thank you so much for all the hard work on this. Our lives have been so good. I shudder to think that these restrictions are going to be removed. Thank you.
Thanks, Elon. Let's see, next I think, and I've written your question down. I think we have still Michelle and Chitra.
Yes. Hi, Michelle. You're now the public speaker.
Hi, my name is Michelle Heisman, and I live on the corner of Arnold and Durham, the Arnold closest to Willow. And I bought my home in 2008. Since then, I have been, my husband and I have been raising 3 children. And I just want to agree with, echo everyone's opinion on how incredibly life-changing the turn restrictions have been onto Willow in terms of quality of life. And I would echo something that someone mentioned earlier about road rage. I can tell you it was bad before. It was particularly bad when construction was happening, to the point my daughter and I, who was 4 at the time, were standing on the corner of Arnold and Durham, and someone got so angry in his pickup truck that he came on the opposite side of the street, swung around the corner so hard, literally came up and over the curb and almost hit me and my daughter because of the frustrations of those turns. And I actually have photo evidence, which I have already emailed in advance of this call. Just a lot of rage of people sort of being stuck in the neighborhood, but also people who live in the neighborhood. I've noticed, since I've moved in since 2008, a ton of families with young children, and the quality of life has so improved in the evenings. I can't tell you how important it's been to our family, how much quieter, how much more peaceful. I think the Willows is just really becoming a stronger, more connective neighborhood. And I would just hate to see it sort of be torn apart by this kind of traffic. And I agree it's a little bit harder to get out at night, but on the other hand, I think it's totally worth it. It's improved our quality of life so much. And I just really appreciate the opportunity that we were allowed to, see how this worked out. And it's been so impactful. I really hope that it will be made permanent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. We have, I think, Chitra, maybe, Patrick?
Yes, looks like Chitra is up next. Hi, Chitra. You are now the public speaker.
Hi. Thanks for the meeting and for calling all of us to put in the comments. I live on Chester Street, and I've been a resident here for about a little over 12 years. And I have a couple of kids, and we do have to leave at the time that the restrictions are in place. It adds anything between 10 and 30 minutes, depending on the time of day and where we're headed to. But it's totally worth the time and the extra effort we have to put in just to follow the restrictions and make sure that we don't get extra traffic coming through the Willows neighborhood again. It sometimes is frustrating when we are headed the opposite way to try and abide by the restrictions. And I've anecdotally counted at least 5 cars, not on average, but 5 cars on several days heading towards Willow, making an illegal right turn when we are committed to putting that extra time and effort to go in the opposite direction and abide by the rules. So I just treat it as a teaching moment and tell my kids that what we're getting by following these restrictions and having the restrictions in place is worth it and way more valuable than removing those restrictions or violating them. So I would really strongly urge all of you to please continue keeping the timing of restrictions of the traffic flow in Willow. Thank you.
Thank you, Chitra. We have, it looks like one more public commenter with their hand up. I think we had more before, maybe Michelle Berry, and there was somebody named Will who wanted to public comment. So this is sort of a last call. We have one more person talking, but if you changed your mind and you want to speak again, great. Okay. Patrick, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, Citran. You are now the public speaker. Are you there? I think you're still muted. Now you're unmuted, I believe.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. I unmuted myself. And this is Claire's husband. My name is Francois Bailey. I just wanted to give my point of view from maybe a technical perspective. I live on Chester Street, and I could not fathom why people would cut through the Willow neighborhood when I observed traffic jams 2 blocks driving to Willow. So I did a Google query to drive towards through my street, and I always observed that Google reported no traffic on Chester Street. The thing is, Google ignores any car that drive slower than 4 miles per hour. And so all the traffic going on Chester or Durham Street was ignored during the construction period. And that's something that I believe we paid a price for. And so I'm glad these turn restrictions are on, because now we just see a few cars go through the neighborhood. And I really do not want to go back to a state where we have traffic jams on our streets. So I understand it's a cost for residents, but we always find a way to reach our point of destination, and I really hope that the restrictions stay in place. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, I'm not sure I got, oh, well, we'll get your name later, maybe. I don't, usually in the minutes, we have people's public comments recorded with their names so that we can understand who they were. And I think you said you were someone's husband, but maybe you can put it in the chat so that we have that in our records. So next we have Michelle Berry.
Hi, Michelle. You've been promoted to public speaker.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to echo what everybody else has said. And I live on Durham Street, and I've lived there for 25 years. And over the years, the traffic has definitely gotten worse. One of the things is I own a business, and my business includes small children. And during this period when people were parked outside because traffic wasn't moving for 45 minutes, some of the parents who try to get their children on time had to park 4 blocks away to walk. And then you would have somebody going on the incorrect side of the road in order to try and cut through to get to a different street. And if you were on my street for 45 minutes, the chances are it wasn't a quicker way to get through the Willows. So it didn't make any sense. So now for me, I would rather drive the extra 10 minutes to go around than have that traffic, that uncertainty, the noise, the pollution, the unsafety of what we had at that time when we had cars parked 4 blocks down the road and cars trying to go from one street to another street to another street to try and find the fastest exit. And I hope more than anything else that you decide to make this a more permanent, put this in place permanently, because it's made our neighborhood much better, much safer. And as other people have said before me, it's turned it back into a neighborhood. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you do that.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, last call for public comments. I think going, gone. Okay, as I mentioned before, I was going to try to write down any questions for staff that were quick so that we could, before we open it up for commission discussion, we can get those answers. And so I wrote down 3. Kevin, you may have.
I want to answer about the VA, that people were going straight. The VA put a sign up, said no.
Sorry about that.
Oh. Okay. All right, moving into the next segment. So I had 3 questions that I wrote down. If anybody caught other questions that I missed, feel free to add those to the staff list. But I have, first, have we considered the impact of COVID? You know, traffic has changed since the time when the survey was most recently done, and I guess it was like January, February. Another impact of COVID has been a reduction in the city budget, and is that affecting traffic patrols? In other words, are the turn restrictions going to be enforceable? And then the third question I got was, could we somehow make it possible for police to only police cut-through traffic as opposed to neighborhood resident traffic? And I think there might have been a question too about cyclists somewhere, I can't remember, but I'll see if staff can answer any of those questions before we go to commission discussion.
Okay, I can answer those questions, I believe, as much as I can. Yes, the PD, our transportation force from PD was eliminated. So the 5 motorcycle officers, the 4 motorcycle officers that we had, the position has been eliminated. So enforcement will be a little more difficult, but it still will be enforced. That was one of the questions. Yeah, as for the coronavirus, we haven't done any study or anything since that's been in place. The study was done well before the coronavirus hit. It was completed in September. So,
sorry, Rich, can
go
you
ahead, Kevin.
make sure you speak into the mic? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we haven't taken into consideration with the study the impacts of the coronavirus and the impacts it have had on traffic at this time. And the other one was with the PD options. So I did notice in the surveys there was a lot of people that asked if the neighborhood could have their own, like a tag or some sort of thing. This was addressed by our police department back in 2017, and because it's a public street, we can't do the code enforcement. We can't enforce it. We can't enforce the turn restrictions through the vehicle code, as well as the no through streets. In that study, it showed. In the staff report, I should say, it showed why you couldn't do that. I think that's the 3 of them.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for commission discussion. I think we should go ahead and use the hand raising thing again for this and then keep ourselves muted otherwise. And I will go last. Looks like Jackie raised your hand.
All right, I'm ready. So I have a couple of thoughts, just, I don't know where we're going to wind up on it, but while overwhelmingly I saw there was a ton of positive comments about the term restrictions, I think I see a lot of pushback about how hard it is to get out of the neighborhood. And while, as I read through those comments, even if I just ignore the comments of the people who were like, it's hard to get out of my neighborhood, but whatever, or it's, yes, it's a little harder, I don't mind, or I don't ever have to go that way at all. It turns out like 10% of them want a special pass. So if you add those 10% in as people who aren't going to like the term restrictions without a pass, like that just is more people who don't like it. And if you add in the 8 people who just willingly admitted they ignore the term restrictions because they're locals and they're just going to take their chances, there's another lump of people. So I would encourage us to think about modifying the plan. And while I have more comments about other stuff, I'll wait until I hear from other people and see what matters.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Who's next? Raise your hand. Anybody? I actually can't, there are too many of you for me to see when your hand is actually waving. So can you, Bill Kirsch, great. Bill, you gotta unmute yourself.
I think we should approve making these turn restrictions permanent. Just seems like the overwhelming feeling among the Willows folks is that their quality of life has improved. I think that's really important for residents, especially having children. And I think it just makes for a stronger community having these turn restrictions in place. So I think we should approve them, make them permanent. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Mike Meyer.
I would also concur with that we just go ahead and make them permanent. The only thing I would be thinking about doing was making them more restricted. I'd go longer, make it more difficult to turn right for longer periods of time, but I'll settle for what we've already done and notice, and everybody's okay living with thus far, mostly.
Okay, who else? Jackie's hand seems to be up again, or maybe she never took her hand down. Hey, Lydia. Lydia?
Yeah, hi. So did, was the issue of bicyclists turning right addressed at all? I'm sorry, somebody may have addressed it, but I didn't hear, I may not have heard it. Did that come up?
I think somebody mentioned in the presentation, maybe Rich mentioned that that had come up, that had been, or somebody had mentioned that it had come up in the comments about, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how likely the police would be to chase down a bicyclist making a stealth right turn on a road, since they're already kind of, I mean, bicyclists making right turns onto Willow are already doing something kind of risky anyway. But yeah, I'd be curious to know whether that they would enforce that for bicyclists, or whether that would be appropriate.
Okay. Actually, staff, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so there was 3 recommendations that were in the report. And they're going to be one.
Rich, the mic.
You gotta hold your mic.
Again. Thanks, Kevin. I need a new system. There's 3 recommendations that Parisi did come up with, and one of them was that came up from the recommendations, I mean, from the comments. At this time, like I say, we haven't had a chance to look at it and talk to PD, and there's some other things that finance-wise we may be limited to, but there's 3 of them that we will be looking at. That's one of them. The other ones, I think it was keep clear signs, and then something regarding turns on Woodland. A couple of comments that came up that we can look at in the future, but for this report, we didn't bring them up. They didn't have much of restrictions really, other than the bicycle one.
Thanks. Yeah, if anybody wants to see what he's talking about, on page 9 of the report from Parisi, there's those restrictions or those recommendations. Okay, other comments, Lydia, or are you? No, okay. Again with the Sebrian. Anybody else? Jackie?
Well, so really my question is if you want the rest of my comments now, and then I just will be all done. Or
you know what, just go for it, and then everybody else can think about what, if anything, they want to say. And we have 2 new commissioners, which I failed to mention earlier on, and I'll talk about them later. But I, always want to give people a little bit of a chance to see how this works before they dive right in. It can be a little intimidating. Go ahead.
So after reading through the comments, I have a couple of, so I am in favor of making permanent some turn restrictions. I think that I would encourage us to think more particularly about whether in sum total, just the way they are. And part of it is because they were put into place during like a seriously crazy traffic fiasco. And as it stands now, like in February, I could drive home down Willow all the way across the freeway after school and it was not a problem. So I think Willow is faster now than it used to be when we put those turn restrictions into place. And that was before the pandemic. So I'm just saying, since the configuration, I feel like Willow goes faster. So that is a thing to consider. A couple of the comments were around sort of after school programs. And so I was wondering if, because Laurel School is split between two campuses and families may or may not have to go across, or, you know what I mean, or get to Kelly Park, that changing the term restriction hours so that they started at 4 instead of 3 would allow for people who needed to get to after school programs to get there without being impacted. I am not in favor, you can't do it anyway, but I'm not in favor of sort of resident passes. And then I think a couple of people commented on having a follow-up traffic count. Like, I think after this, whatever changes are made, it would be interesting to do a follow-up count. I think a couple of people mentioned changing one of the getting rid of one of the turn restrictions. And I saw at Durham, maybe because the VA hospital's there, so maybe not all 3 of them, because there are a lot of people talking about the difficulties of getting out of your neighborhood. And as a resident of Belhaven, I can absolutely sympathize with how frustrating it is when it takes you 20 minutes just to get to Willow. Like, it's an extra hardship when there's all those other ones. And then I have some kind of signage issues, but that's a particular thing for the end of it. I think that's all.
Actually, Jackie, can you just go ahead and dump your issues?
Okay.
What will happen is somebody's probably going to want to make a motion, and then we're going to want to make sure that the motion includes every possible,
Got it. Okay, I would say that the signing obviously would need to be more visible. Like, there's a couple of places where you don't know that you can't turn until you're in that block. And so I would encourage us, when we do the signage, that it is far enough in advance that they can see it. And if you are driving down, what street is that, Chester? It should say that you can't, there is no outlet between 3 and 7, because you already can't turn left and now you can't turn right between 3 and 7. So it needs to be really clear if you're approaching that street that you can't get out of that block between those hours. So I would make that more clear instead of just no turn lefts. And I am in favor of an exception for bikes, although I would add that if you're trying to get onto Willow from Durham, that's like, it's a really crappy spot to get onto Willow. I just can see that we have robust bike lanes over the freeway and on the other side of that stretch. And so I'm assuming down the road we'll also have good bike lanes. And so I 100% think exceptions need to be made for bikes instead of just hoping they don't get pulled over, because that feels like something that can be used for targeting. And I think we should not do that. Okay, that really is everything.
Thanks, Jackie. Dina Levin.
Can you hear me? Am I unmuted here? Am I unmuted enough places? All right. So I have a question and a quick comment, and the question is for staff to speak with their professional expertise about Commissioner Cibrian's recommendation about changing the hours to 4 to facilitate people getting to after-school programs. What does staff think about that idea? And then my comment is whether it is feasible to have this not pertain to bikes, which legally it seems like it is, because there are other places that, where bikes have different rules. And I think that that seems like a reasonable thing, since cyclists were not the exacerbating the car traffic congestion. And I agree with Commissioner Cibrian's perspective on that. So I would like to see that as part of a motion, assuming that it is legally possible to do.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Levin, Vice Chair Levin. Anybody else? Isaac, Patrice, I know we just threw you in here today, but
So, hi, I'm Isaac, and I'll +1 the comments that Jackie and Adina made specifically around the additional considerations that can be made to alleviate some of the length of time it takes for residents to get out of the neighborhood and for bicyclists, possible exceptions for bicyclists. +1 to those comments. And based on my observations in this meeting, it sounds like there is overwhelming support for making this change permanent. And the safety of the kids definitely sounds like a strong consideration that should be made against the convenience of getting out of the neighborhood faster.
Thanks, Isaac. Patrice, anything you want to say?
Sure. I have lived in the Willows for about 26 years, and I've also seen a lot of the changes that the public referred to. I lived on Woodland, and those numbers that they showed early on of increases of 75% and 116% traffic on Woodland, I definitely felt. So I feel like there's probably more work to be done in the Willows, but I think at a minimum, we can put these term restrictions into place permanently. I definitely heard the passion in people's voices about their quality of life being impacted, of not being able to get in and out of their driveway, having to park far away, the noise, the road rage, all of that. Have had many close calls on Woodland myself with cut-through traffic. So I'm totally in favor of making these term restrictions permanent. And you know, if the community wishes to do more, I would be open to hearing that as well.
Thank you, Patrice. Okay, someone from the attendees has been trying to say something, and I'm not really sure how to handle that. Kevin, there's sort of a piece of information that one of our former public commenters shared. Can I contribute that to the discussion? I would like to.
Normally that, that wouldn't be the case.
I know.
Yes, so since in the chat room, and I believe most people have read it already, so I'm going to go ahead and maybe just read it out loud. But I think
that would be great. So that way everybody who's on the recording can hear it.
For future reference, I think.
But let's not do this.
Practice that will encourage going forward. But so this is from a resident that basically specified that kids do ride their bikes from school starting from around 3 p.m. So the desire is to hope not to change the start time to 4 p.m. for that reason.
Okay, all right. We have 2 more hands up. Again, Adina and Michael. Adina. No, your hand.
I had just neglected to put my hand down, so let me fix that.
Mike Meyer.
Yeah, so a couple things. One, whenever we're ready, I'm ready to make a motion to remind everybody who's paying attention here that this is an advisory committee, that if we vote to move this forward, then it goes to City Council for yet more vetting and your ability to also have input there should you think we were a bunch of idiots or we didn't listen to you. There's still more public time to get involved. And then for the process of Zoom, you can turn the chat off. For compliance reasons, lots of businesses do. It's in the settings for the account, and you can. So then you don't have something that the public can't see.
Thank you, Mike. And I should have said that earlier. Yes, we're an advisory body, and this will be coming to the council later with our recommendation, which they will take as part of their input. But they also consider lots of other input, including yours. So, Michael, does anybody else have a comment before Michael makes a motion? This doesn't have to be the end all and be all motion, by the way. It's just a starting salvo. Go for it, Michael.
I'd like to move that we recommend to make the the existing turn restrictions permanent, with the exception of adding, if it's legally allowed, which to allow bicycles, accept bicycles. And that's my motion.
I will second that motion for purposes of discussion. And we have a motion on the table. So now if anybody has a friendly amendment to offer or discussion, please do so. Otherwise, maybe we'll have a vote. Does anybody want to offer a friendly amendment? I know Jackie had and Adina both had thoughts. Adina.
Yeah, so a friendly amendment to have an exception for people using bicycles.
I think he got that one.
That was already in the motion, Ms. Lemon.
I'm sorry, missed it. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. All in favor, raise your metaphorical hand, or yeah, just raise hands, real hands. High five or not. Okay. Kevin, do you have a sense of whose hands are up?
Yes, I believe Commissioner Lee did not raise her hand, so I think we want to continue to say, oh, there it is. Never mind. Haha, unanimous.
Okay, all right. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
it's really confusing with the hands and the hands.
I see. My apologies. Yes.
I raised it virtually too. I did them both, two hands, double-handed.
We'll certainly we'll make sure to sort this out for the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That's fancy, Michael. All opposed? Any opposed? Sorry, I've got to lower. This is why it's confusing, because you have to lower your hand if you have to remember to lower your hand. Anybody abstaining for any reasons? Okay, so did everybody vote?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so that motion passes. Kevin, can you just read again for our guests what the motion is that passed? That will be our recommendation to City Council.
Yeah, so the recommendation is to recommend to City Council to approve staff recommendation with a and to explore allowing bike through the restrictions. So that's something that staff will explore and bring that to the City Council at the appropriate time.
Great. All right, thanks everybody. Okay, so that's it for that topic. And thank you to all of our attendees. We now get to the fun part that we do every time of this year, where we talk about who our chair and vice chair will be for next year. This is also going to be the time when I deviate from my chair notes briefly and wanted to just welcome our two new members. We have joining us tonight Patrice Espinoza and Isaac Wyatt. And I actually would like to invite each of you to give a really quick, 30-second, here's who I am, here's why I'm doing this, here's what I'm excited about kind of scenario, so that everybody can get a sense of why you're here. Sorry to put you on the spot. You can also not do that, but just, introduction.
Okay, I'll jump in first. Hi, everyone. I'm Isaac Wyatt. I am a Menlo Park resident for just 5 years. And my wife and I are frequent patrons of local small businesses and public services like libraries. And we use a variety of transportation in Menlo Park, including but not limited to being pedestrians, public transit like Caltrain, and of course, vehicle traffic and jogging and running paths as well. And so I'm interested in serving on this commission because not only do I want to help contribute to having a safe and efficient transit experience within Menlo Park, but I want to help make it sustainable and scalable as our community continues to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Patrice, you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi, I'm Patrice Espinoza. I am a 26+ year resident of Menlo Park. Most of that was in the Willows. More recently, I've been in Sharon Heights. I have 3 children that we raised in Menlo Park. 2 are now in college. One's a sophomore in high school. And I am a dedicated and committed bike commuter. I also multimodal transport with Caltrain on my bike to go to San Francisco a few times every week or to Sunnyvale. And I'm just really, this is a good time for me in my life with my kids being a little bit older to finally give back to my community, get involved. And I'm looking forward to bringing kind of my interest and my expertise around bicycles as transportation to the Complete Streets Commission.
Thank you so much and welcome. Okay, now I'm going back to my chair notes. Kevin Chen, would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for E3, oops, sorry, I am also trying to toggle between different windows here. So for E3 is our annual selection of chair and vice chair. So first of all, I just want to say thanks to this year's chair and vice chair, Katie Baruzzi and Adina Levin, for working with staff to establishing agendas. And then of course, with COVID-19, certainly it didn't make things any easier for the two of you either. So definitely appreciate your service and your continued support. So with that being said, we are gonna go ahead and open the table, open the floor for nomination. Let's go ahead and maybe start with chair. So I will go ahead and open the floor for any nominations.
Bill, you gotta unmute yourself.
I nominate Adina Levin for chairperson. I think she's in her stint as vice chair, and she's more than prepared to take on the role of chairperson.
I thought last time we did this that we agreed that whoever this was the first meeting for people, that they were the chair and vice chair. So I thought it was supposed to be Isaac and Patrice automatically.
We also agreed that they were going to have to sing the first act of Hamilton.
That's right. That's right.
So I regret though that Adina, I did not get that on the agenda fast enough. So I will second not all of what we just said, but just what Bill proposed.
Okay, seeing no other nominations, we'll go ahead and close that nomination. And basically with the chairs, apologies, I'm also writing notes at the same time. So we'll go ahead and open the floor for a vote. For those that support Commissioner Levin to be the chair for this coming year, please raise your hand.
I'll apologize for saying yay to you, Adina, in advance. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. That is unanimous.
I could quote from Hamilton, but will abstain.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Congratulations, new Chair Levin. We should do vice chair now, right, Kevin?
Yes, we'll go ahead and open the floor for nomination for vice chair of the commission.
I would like to make a nomination. I would like to nominate Lydia Lee. She's been on the commission for a long time and has lots of good insights.
Okay, great. Any other nomination?
Can I second that?
Absolutely. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the floor. And so with that, I will go ahead and ask the commissioners that wish to vote for Commissioner Lee to be the vice chair. Please raise your hands. Okay.
With apologies, Lydia.
Great, that's unanimous, so excellent.
At this point, I think I'm supposed to invite to ask the newly elected chair if she would like to take over or wishes to have the outgoing chair finish the meeting.
I think the outgoing chair can continue to complete this meeting.
Okay, great. That's good because I have the speaker notes. And you might not have them open right now. All right, so that wraps up item E3. And now we're going into informational items. So informational items are transmitted to the Commission in staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the Commission. Informational items are not action items. However, a Commission, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. Shoot, speaking of comment, I just realized I was supposed to actually invite public comment on the election of chair and vice chair. I think I kind of missed the boat on that. I apologize to members of the public who wished to speak on that. Kevin, do we need to reopen that?
Well, you know what? Yeah, I believe that's for best practice. Let's go ahead and just reopen that. Just
Okay, I really apologize. I'm reopening item E3. I forgot to ask about public comment. Does anybody want to make public comment about the chair or vice chair rules?
Perhaps we could have Patrick, if you don't mind, just rereading the instruction real quick. That way we can also give the members a couple minutes to find that raise hand button if they so choose.
Of course, yeah. For members of the public who are in attendance and you've missed my other announcements, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raise hand feature. After that, I'll be able to open your microphone and you'll be able to provide public comment.
All right, I think we're good. That was a really contentious election, but seems like the public didn't have strong opinions about it. So congratulations, thank you both for taking on these roles, and we will now move back to informational items.
I think we should take this moment to thank the outgoing chair and have a moment of silence for the cookies, cupcakes, or other snacks that we are unable to partake in, and to thank our outgoing chair. So thank you, Katie.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been fun. All right, back again.
I think it's officially now not a thankless job, by the way.
It's not a thankless job, no. And
because of that moment.
And there have been cookies and cakes and things in the past, and I'm sure there will be again. There will be a day when Susie Cakes decides to open up again in downtown Menlo Park. So back to F again, informational items. This is usually Kevin, but then often also other commissioners have informational items. Kevin, what do you have for us?
Great, Madam Chair. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give a quick update on a few things that are going on in the city. The first thing I wanted to mention is that the city staff, we're actually going to the city council on July 14th for a study session on the Transportation Management Association feasibility. So for those that are interested in the item, this is our TMA. It's the ongoing effort to study a feasibility for a potential TMA structure. So there'll be many operations and many recommendations in terms of the structure. So if that's something of interest to you, definitely stay tuned for that one. That will be going to the City Council on July 14th. I also want to briefly mention a couple of construction projects that have been completed over the duration of COVID-19. We have successfully upgraded 5 existing crosswalk RFBs. For the new commissioners, the locations were Middlefield Road at Linfield. So that's the one across Middlefield and with the overhead. So if you're driven by the area, you definitely see some improvements there. The second location is on Ravenswood at Alma. So that's near the train station. The third location is Santa Cruz at Johnson Street. The fourth location is on Oak Grove near the post office. And the final 5th location is on Crank Street near Crank Place. That's next to the senior center. So I'm sorry, the senior housing development. The second construction project I want to update the commissioner on is the Oak Grove sidewalk construction. So for those that definitely aware of the project, this is the completion, connectivity of the Oak Grove sidewalk project, primarily on the north side, connecting, which was previously a dirt pathway. There's now a concrete sidewalk there connecting the entire Oak Grove section. So we were also able to extend the turn pocket into Nativity School as well. So that was a really good improvement. Hopefully that will come in handy once the school is reopened and more cars are on the road. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude my updates.
Thank you, Kevin. Any other pithy updates? Bill.
I had a question for Kevin. Kevin, can you update us on the middle undercrossing?
Yes, so the middle undercrossing is still currently under design. So we are still tentatively hoping that we'll be able to align the construction and the opening day with 500. There's currently not a lot of movement on staff's end. It's currently under the design phase.
What was that last thing you said, Kevin?
It's under the design phase right now.
Have you come to an agreement with Caltrain about the logistics of, getting under the tracks?
Specifically in terms of how deep the track goes, or
well, the timing for closing, stopping the trains or whatever's going to happen.
I see.
Agreement in place on the logistics of doing that.
Not yet. Typically, that will be handled once the design is complete and we have a better sense of what type of construction activity we want to move forward with. Currently, I believe the last time I checked, there were 2 construction methodologies being explored, and each would impact the schedule slightly differently, depending on which one Caltrain is more comfortable with. So as far as I know, that hasn't been decided yet. But I will definitely check in with the project manager. If I don't have the latest information, I'll share that with the commission.
Last question in that regard. What is the timing for completing the undercrossing?
Completing the undercrossing, I believe before COVID-19, we were shooting for 2022. Which I believe we were trying to align that with the opening of 500 El Camino Real. So that is tentatively still the schedule. Obviously, given the economic changes that are happening associated with COVID-19, there's certainly some uncertainty associated with that. But that's currently in time, we're still shooting for 2022.
Thank you.
Hopefully concurrent with the Middle Plaza project.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I see a hand up. Nope, that was just Bill. Okay. In that case, sorry, I'm like scrolling back and forth to make sure I'm not missing anybody. In that case, I'm going to move on to. Okay, was that update on major project status, Kev?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm a little, I'm out of practice, and now it's too late. I won't be able to do this anymore. So now we're moving into G, committee and subcommittee reports. So this is where I want to just, actually 2 things. I want to share with our new commissioners that RFB is short for rectangular flashing beacon. And that there are going to be so many acronyms that you may already know, given your greater familiarity, especially Patrice, you're kind of in the biz. But just as the acronyms come up, let's remember to define them for people if we can. Okay, so we have a bunch of subcommittees, and the subcommittees are how we actually get a lot of work done, because it's painful to try to have discussions and planning with people, like 10 people. So they're listed in the agenda, and we will often have items from our work plan that are sort of allocated to different subcommittees, and the subcommittees tend to work with staff. And so they're sort of commissioner driven, but very connected to staff and connected in with the broader planning aspects of the city. And so at the end of every meeting, we have subcommittee updates, and you don't have to have a subcommittee update. In fact, if you don't have an update, we're always usually tired by this point, so you're encouraged not to make one up. But as the subcommittee updates are proceeding, you might want to look at the subcommittees and ask any, maybe we can actually, for each subcommittee, have the subcommittee members just say a quick line, one subcommittee member say something quick about what their subcommittee is, because we'll want to invite you to join subcommittees at our next meeting. And that way you can sort of think about what you're excited about and look back at our work plan and figure out what moves you. Great, I'll stop talking now. So the first subcommittee on our list is Active Transportation Network Subcommittee, which sadly now is just Bill Kirsch, because we have lost Evan and John to attrition. Bill, any updates? Do you want to say what the Active Transportation Network Subcommittee does or has done?
Well, what we've done, or what we're trying to do, I believe, is stitch together a state network of bicycling lanes, etc., for Menlo Park. We also are trying to address intersections and road sections that are particularly dangerous, and try to push the city, or work with our commission to push the city to address those dangerous sections around town. There's lots of work to do. Our commission has done a lot. I think we have a great opportunity now to push the cycling and pedestrian network further. So that's what we do. And we need a couple new members.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Okay, so next is the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee. And I'm sure Adina has an update because there's something happening.
I do.
Yeah.
And did I mute myself, or am I great? I am not muted. Fantastic. So as Kevin mentioned earlier, it sounds like the Climate Action Plan recommendation from the Environmental Quality Commission is going to be coming before the City Council next week, Tuesday, unless Kevin has looked up and has contrary evidence to that. The Environmental Quality Commission had produced a report that had a number of measures that highlighted reduction of carbon emissions and from transportation. And some of them were with regard to reducing vehicle miles traveled, in other words, reducing driving. And that included recommendations to advance our bicycle and pedestrian network. And in the interest of that, they were recommending, earlier in the meeting, Kevin had talked about the city's budget and that resulting in freezing some of the city's transportation positions. However, in the budget discussion, the City Council also discussed a willingness to use up to about $1 million in reserves in order to be able to achieve known priorities that were not yet accounted for in the budget, including they named the Climate Action Plan. And so the EQC's recommendation is to unfreeze positions in order to enable that implementation of vehicle miles traveled reducing projects. And that is something that as a committee member, I think is good. And the other thing that they recommended is there were also some staffing questions or considerations about moving ahead with planning for housing near transportation and services, which is another strategy that can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that is another thing that as a subcommittee member focusing on the VMT reduction, I think are good. There were also some other recommendations relating to electric vehicles that I believe that Michael Meyer may be able to summarize and say whether he agrees with them or has some other opinion. And then Kevin, this is not agendized specifically for us to vote on. So can you remind us what kind of recommendation activities we can do given the fact that it is not specifically agendized? But Michael first on the EV, and then Kevin, tell us what we can do.
Didn't Kevin say straw poll or something like that?
Yeah, so given that this is not a regular business item, we cannot take an official vote. However, given the topic of conversation, if the commission feels, and after Commissioner Meyer had a chance to discuss his opinion about the EV charging station, if the commission overall has a desire to express support for the items that have the Vice Chair 11 have listed previously, then perhaps we can go ahead and take a straw poll. What that means is that I will then go ahead and ask the commission if they would support the idea being recommended by both Commissioners Levin and Meyer. And if so, they allow them the opportunity to go to the City Council and express that opinion. So again, because it's not a regular business item, it's not an official vote. However, we do have the flexibility of taking a straw vote, which then will be able to share to Commission 11 where there is a majority support from the commission to express what the idea that she had expressed to the City Council directly. So at this point, what I would recommend is perhaps open the floor to Commissioner Meyer to have him talk about the EV charging stations. And at that point, if the commission overall feels like there is the majority support from the commission to share those ideas with the City Council, then I'll go ahead and open it up for a straw poll.
And when were we planning on trying to bring this to the City Council, Adina? Sorry, I saw your emails going around, but I didn't have enough time to go through everything.
Yeah, that is was expected to go to the City Council on this coming Tuesday.
So before we could actually agendize this and get it into a broader discussion, but if I recall correctly from what you had told me, because I haven't read through the document, that they were talking about requiring by 2025 that all new EV electric vehicle, all new vehicle purchases be electric vehicles in Menlo Park. That it would be a recommendation, not law, clearly. And then also that they were talking about supporting EV chargers, supporting the installation of them everywhere in new construction, and as much as possible, as well as encourage and contribute to the building of them. And I don't recall whether it was your comment that was saying that we were talking about wanting to make sure that more of them got into multi-unit dwellings, which is kind of one of the problems EV chargers have had, is that part of adopting electric vehicle is that it really moves the paradigm from being that people go to fueling stations to your fueling station is your home. And if you're in an apartment or a condo, it's harder to get that in. Assuming that we can figure out how to make that happen. I'm fully supportive of everything that the EQC was saying and trying to be very aggressive in their stance of making the shift to electric vehicles.
Okay, and Michael, in the email that I sent to you, the material from the EQC, I just copied and pasted, and I asked some questions, and those questions were from me, but the paragraphs were verbatim from the EQC recommendation.
Gotcha. So, sorry, Katie, go ahead.
No, I was just going to jump in. I don't know if anybody else is feeling, I'm somebody who tends to get information better visually, and I want to just press a pause quickly and ask Kevin about a process point. I don't know if everybody's going to be able to internalize everything that you're saying enough to make an opinion that if they haven't had a chance to read it. And I'm wondering, Kevin, if we could do the straw poll via email with a bulleted list. This is what, these are the 5 points that we're basically highly supporting that the EQC is recommending, or is that too much trouble? I don't want to and maybe I'm the only one. And I've actually watched the EQC presentation, so I kind of know more about it. But I'm sensitive. I want to be sensitive to the fact that for a lot of people, this is possibly a lot of new information at once, and that they might feel better not being put on the spot. Is there a way to do this via email, or is that not necessary or appropriate?
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the approach that you're taking here. I have to say this is beyond my my expertise at this with the Brown Act violation and straw poll.
Okay.
However, given the fact that it's the straw poll in of itself is a representation of a unofficial vote, I think it might be okay.
Okay.
So I would say maybe let's go ahead and have that discussion tonight, and then maybe perhaps what I'll do is I'll solicit an email from Vice Chair Levin with the bulletize your talking points. I'll share that with the commission, and then ask them if there's an interest to vote on those recommendations. So it's basically a three-tier approach. One is to get those bullet points from Commissioner Levin. I will then share that with the commission to see if they have a strong opinion about it. And if they do, then I will then, if there's a majority of them that wants to vote, then I will open a straw poll. If the majority of feedback that I'm getting is that they would prefer not to vote, then I will not do that.
Adina is totally wishing she'd taken over the meeting from me before this happened. Is that okay? Well, it makes it a little more onerous. I just want to respect I want to make sure people feel like, you know, they're putting their name on something that they fully can like grasp. Okay, carry on with the talking.
I think it's the early takeaway from it is, like, if you were just reading the subject line of the email, is that the EQC is being insanely aggressive, and I like it. It's great. I think it's fantastic. I think their goals are very admirable and inspiring. So I look forward to seeing what everybody else says. And then I have to say, Adina, this was the first tonight that I heard that John's not even on the commission anymore. So I guess, is that right? Did I hear that right somewhere? Did I hear John's no longer on the commission?
Yes, that's correct. Commissioner John Weiner decided to not continue his term, so he basically.
Or Cromie, right? John Cromie.
Oh, I'm sorry. John, no, he's still on the commission.
He's just not here tonight.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's just not here tonight. My apologies. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Anything else to say about this? Do people have a general sense of the flavor?
I will leave with two quick thoughts. One is that those bullet points are not going to go out until tomorrow morning, and I apologize in advance for that. They'll go out early in the morning. And then the second is that one of the things that we're seeing around the world with COVID is many people traveling differently, including greatly increased use of bicycling and walking, and infrastructure going in cities all around the world. And the EQC's recommendations are things that can help this city take those lessons to heart and advance our climate action. And I will send that out in bullet points in the morning.
Thank you, Adina. Okay, Downtown Access and Parking Subcommittee. This is us. Adina and I are on this. So the idea behind the Downtown Parking and Access Subcommittee is that our downtown area has, there are people who have expressed concerns in the past about maybe we need a parking garage. There are other people who felt that maybe the downtown could be a little safer or more welcoming for other kinds of transportation. And Adina and I have been on a subcommittee to basically work on associated goals. The thing that's actually most recently come up on this is, and the thing that I think Adina and I are probably going to be working on in the very near term, is maybe making some recommendations to City Council about the ongoing pilot on Santa Cruz Ave, and some of the metrics that they might use to determine whether or not it's effective. I mean, the main goal of the pilot really was to get some of the merchants back on their feet, because so many people were struggling to stay in business. It's just been a really terrible time for small business owners. Raj Chetty actually did some really interesting research about this. But basically, in places like Menlo Park and Bethesda, Maryland, like, rich people are staying home and not going out to eat, and small businesses have much higher layoffs than they do in other parts of the country where there's like less of a differential. So it's like these downtown boutiques and restaurants have been getting really hit hard. So those are the main goals of the downtown pilot. But it's also been an interesting experiment to see what could happen if we made the downtown a little bit more inviting and friendly for pedestrians and cyclists. And there have been discussions over the years about making it a downtown sort of like a mall type thing, like a Pearl Street. And so this has been a time to sort of experiment with that. And Adina and I are going to be discussing what are some ways in which we could get at not just the impact, positive or negative for merchants, but also some of the impacts that residents might be feeling as they're trying to get around downtown. Are we seeing more pedestrians? Are we seeing more cyclists? Are people feeling safer? Are they less safe? And so we'll be talking about that. Adina, you want to add anything?
And also considering drivers as adds, some level of inconvenience to drivers. So what is the effect, positive and negative, on people using those different modes, including any changes that they would, yes, that is what we were going to be talking about.
Yes. Okay. The next subcommittee is the multimodal subcommittee. This is Commissioner Sebrian and again, Commissioner Levin, Chair Levin. Do you want to give a quick description of what this one is about?
Yeah, so this is about regional projects and policy issues relating to multimodal transportation. And a policy issue would be like transportation demand management, and a regional project would be like the Dumbarton bus and rail improvements being contemplated at a regional level.
Updates from the subcommittee? You made one update before at the beginning of the meeting about Caltrain.
Right. There's actually it's 9:23, and so in 1 minute or less, changes going on in Dumbarton projects. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission has adopted a regional express bus program idea to have regional express buses go along with regional express lanes. And one of the projects in that program that they are adopting and looking to include in the Plan Bay Area 2050 in the earlier part of the plan is an express bus route going from Redwood City to Oakland through Menlo Park. So that is a potentially good thing, in my opinion, for practical transportation and car traffic relief. The Dumbarton Rail project has hit some bumps with Facebook expressing some doubt about whether they would continue to fund the environmental impact report for a rail project. It was on the edge about whether it was going to be included in the Metropolitan Transportation Commission's Plan Bay Area, which is what would make it be eligible for federal and state funding when such funding becomes available. It is currently in, and I'll continue to keep an eye out on that. It's being reviewed by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, a committee on Friday. It's going to go through the full commission later in the month with decisions made in September. And those are the updates. Gosh, that took 3 minutes, sorry.
That's okay, that was great. It's really great to have Adina on the commission because she's so plugged into the regional networks and to what's happening with our public transit. She's kind of our guru on that front. So it's really helpful to have her giving us updates. So Transportation Master Plan Subcommittee, we do not have an update, do we? No. So this is the Transportation Master Plan is a planning effort that the city has been undergoing that is getting closer to completion. Kevin, remind me, you told me at the agenda setting meeting when it was possibly going to come back to council. And I don't remember when that was.
Right, so the Transportation Master Plan, just for the benefit of the two new commissioners, is essentially a citywide document. It is a effort that has taken, I believe, close to 2 years, if I remember correctly. But basically, it's a document that imagine if money is no object, what the city would like to see within for the next 20, 30 years or so. So in this document, you will essentially see all the projects that the city wants to build eventually. And that's vehicular mode, bicycle, pedestrian, transit, all modes. So that particular project, after the 2 years, is currently in its draft phase. I believe we're waiting for, we're working with the consultant to finalize the draft version. It's actually going to come to the commission first. We're hoping to either come to the commission next month, the month of August, or maybe the month of September. And at that time, the commission will then have an opportunity to review this draft document and provide your feedback accordingly.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So that's the Transportation Master Plan Subcommittee. We probably aren't going to have much more work to do, but that's what Adina and I had been doing, was going through the plan with a fine-tooth comb and trying to identify gaps and things that seemed confusing or maybe counter to our understanding of how the streets might be. And so we did that. It was mostly last year, actually. So then, I skipped the Safe Routes to School subcommittee. I'm so sorry. This is an important one. And I think Commissioner Lee had an update on this.
Yeah, so the Safe Routes to School subcommittee is pretty self-explanatory. It's about helping kids bike and walk safely to school. Menlo Park is kind of confusing because we have multiple school districts and a lot of private schools. And so any policies and communications tend to be very complex. So I brought up the main point from the last Safe Routes to School task force meeting, which was the city's Safe Routes to School coordinator on staff, Andre Ann, with a bunch of people from representing the schools and yeah, mainly from the schools, but sort of police, and I'm trying to think who was there. There were quite a few people there, also representing the county as well. So the main point was that we know that there will probably be a lot of kids who will not be able to take the bus to school in the fall, and school is starting in some form or other next month. So our window of time in which to make an impact and help those kids, get to school more safely outside of cars is pretty limited. I think ideally is an organizational effort by the Safe Routes to School coordinator on the city staff, because she is the one that has the kind of immediate connections to a lot of the schools that are affected. But pending whatever Kevin comes back to us with, it may be that our subcommittee, which includes me and Jackie and Michael, I believe, Mike, right? Those are the three, may be called to sort of jump into action and help out in some form. So again, I think we have this very limited window before things, traffic sort of school routines get set. So if we can do something that will help out when we know there are a lot of kids that are going to be hitting the roads in one form or the other.
You got about 2 weeks too before we know what the actual plan is for school, right?
Well, let's just assume that we know that a lot of schools are going to be reopening in some form, and the kids that have traditionally taken, some of those kids that have traditionally taken the bus will not be able to take the bus because of limited bus availability, right? Because, they're not going to be able to pack them in the way they used to. So it's going to be very drastically reduced. Even with the, limited numbers that are going to be on campus on a given day, I still think they're looking at a big gap.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Got to plan for it. I'm more of the mind that it's not a chance that the schools are going to open, but okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you done? I'm sorry, Lydia. I didn't mean to
that's it. That's the big thing on the horizon for us right now.
If anybody wants to get a little more information, Jen Wallace, who founded Parents for Safe Routes, wrote a pretty good summary of the issues to City Council a while back, and I think we could have it. Lydia, did you already send that to Kevin to send to commissioners, or do we have a better summary? You're muted.
I sent the meeting notes to Kevin.
Okay.
There's a little summary of it. Basically, hundreds of kids are not going to be
are not going to be able to get to school the way they have been.
Right.
Okay, so the last subcommittee is the Zero Emissions Subcommittee, which is currently John Cromie, who's absent tonight, and Mike Meyer. Mike, you got anything for us from Zero Emissions Subcommittee? You want to tell people what it is?
Yeah, there's no update right now, but just so that new people know, this is the most coveted subcommittee, probably in the Western United States. So you might want to try to, argue amongst yourselves who gets on it. There's another spot. We could cram both of you on there if you wanted. But basically, we're looking at just how we can help the adoption of zero emission vehicles in the city, as well as just zero emissions energy, anything zero emissions. We could be talking solar panels, we could be talking batteries, scooters, whatever. We're always like to have more people there. Hopefully we're going to be, I think all of these things are getting jump started anyway right now, that like we said before the meeting started, that I think we got punted, we got drop kicked 10 years ahead of everything that we thought that we were going to be doing. And there's some great opportunity, especially on the zero emissions front. So I look forward to working with all of y'all. And if you want to join, let us know.
Thanks so much. So that concludes our subcommittee reports and descriptions. And at this point, unless Kevin, you're seeing anything that I've forgotten, like another public comment period or something, new commissioner to introduce? No, I think we're Act 3 of Hamilton. No, okay. I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all so much. It's 9:33. I don't have my gavel, so I'll just, poof. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you guys.
It sure was awesome to get to see you all again.
Yes, it was.
Doing something. It's nice to be doing something again. So stay safe, everybody.
Yeah, it was really nice to see everybody.
Bye, everybody. Welcome, Isaac.
Nice meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Good night.
Good night.